There's more value in the connections outside of these talks than actually listening to the talks themselves. We've spoken to a lot of very experienced, very tenured people who have lots of, great stories and mistakes that we can learn from so that we don't have to make them as well.
Hello, my name is Ronan Keriel and I work at the Xilinx Research Lab in San Jose, California. So I will talk about modern C++ on Xilinx FPGAs. So nowadays the real problem in computing is the power wall and the speed of light. So we have some current physical limits, such as the power consumptions, which makes that you cannot turn on all the transistors without having your circuit melting. That's what we call the dark silicon, which is that you can implement a lot of transistors, but you cannot use them all at the same time. So at some point you have to switch off the power of some part of your circuits, and you will lose some efficiency. And another issue is that just accessing memory will require quite a lot of energy compared to sometimes just redoing the computation. And nowadays chips are so large that just moving data inside the chip is quite energy inefficient. And another issue is that speed of light has not increased a lot since long time ago. And if you think about gigahertz processor, then it means that just accessing your memory will cost you tens of thousands of instructions, for example, just for waiting the memory. And nowadays, even at that speed, moving data across chips will take forever. So just to give some ideas, so we always show this old slide because that's a very secret information you cannot get on the latest technology. So it's maybe 10-year-old technology, but just to give you the idea. For example, an 8-bit computation costs almost nothing, but if you have bigger types such as 32-bit, it will cost more energy, and multiplication will cost even more. And if you go floating point, then it's quite more complex. And what is interesting is to compare to the storage. Just storing some information in some static RAM costs a lot of energy compared to just doing an addition. And a DRAM, which is a less expensive memory, but just to access it will cost you quite a lot of energy. But if we look at the time you spend and the energy you spend just moving things inside your circuits, you can see that, for example, just sending data from one corner of your chip to the other one will cost you 1 nanojoule, which is very expensive. And you remember, for example, the DRAM read cost. Here it's less than 1 nanojoule, but actually the DRAM is not on chip, so you have to communicate to your DRAM very far away from your chip, and that costs really a lot of energy. So what it means is that it has some implication on how you will do hardware and software. Typically, you will use the old tricks, which is locality and hierarchy, and use a lot of parallelism. So that's why you have this weird, for example, memory architectures with non-uniform memory access. You will have a lot of distributed memories with even different address spaces. Some local memory, non-coherent one, and you can even have processor in memory. That means that you will have directly the computation inside the memory chip or in the memory controller just to, for example, imagine you could execute some SQL query directly in your DRAM or things like that. And you can stack your chip just to improve the efficiency too. So that means that you will have a lot of architecture specialization to decrease the power consumption. And nowadays you are able to switch off some parts of your circuit when you do not use it. But the nice takeaway, I hope, is that perhaps because of that, we might have some more efficient programmers, just because you will have a quick metrics in the battery time of your system, for example. So typical modern or even future system is that you have usually a CPU with a lot of cores to just control your system, and you might have some GPUs with different compute units interacting with different kind of memories. Since I work at Xilinx, we have some FPGAs that I will talk a little bit more later. And now, for example, we have also a lot of stuff in our circuits, such as arrays of DSPs that you can program. And of course, you can add your own accelerator to these pictures. And in real system, you will have to scale that. For example, if you are in the HPC world, you will have this replicated at the data center level. So we really need a programming model for the full system. And I like the Tim Matson's law from Intel, which is no new language, because it's difficult to be accepted. So do you remember this language? That looks like a good candidate. Direct mapping to the hardware, zero cost abstraction. So, wow, cool. There is just a bug is that there is no heterogeneous computing support, because, C++ assumes that you will have a unified memory world, and so you can always access the memory. Fortunately, there is a parallel world, the Khronos world, where you have people thinking about these issues. And a lot of companies and academia are working on this. And they are defining some standards, such as, probably the most famous are the graphics one, such as Vulkan, OpenGL, and so on. But for me, the more interesting is the compute side, and there are OpenCL and Sphere, which are well-known and rather old now. And there is this newer SYCL, which is actually based on C++. Good news, this year we published the latest specification of SYCL 2020. And that's great. Okay, full disclosure. I am the spec editor of this specification, so I cannot say that it's bad, of course. But you can look at the website if you are interested. And even more interesting for end user is that now there are maybe tens of implementation of SYCL existing. The oldest one is probably Compute CPP, which is a closed source. But with this implementation, you can address all the GPUs, for example, the FPGAs, and so on, because for example, they support the OpenCL backend, and there is also a backend for NVIDIA GPUs, but it looks like they are more focused now on automotive stuff. Another interesting implementation is OneAPI DPC++ from Intel. And what is cool is that it's open source, and they are currently upstreaming it in Clang LLVM. So we will have native SYCL support in Clang LLVM, and they can support nowadays all the Intel products, but also NVIDIA GPUs, and I think now also AMD GPUs. Another serious implementation is from German University SYCL, which is able to target either OpenMP, NVIDIA GPUs, and HIP or ROCm AMD GPUs, and also Intel GPUs recently. And there are other implementation. More, for example, there is Silcan for Vulkan. There is even the Uber SYCL, which is Celerity. It's SYCL based on MPI, based on SYCL on the node. So then you can run all your SYCL application across your data center. Personally, I started to the Tricycle open source implementation when I was working at AMD before, in 2014 to help the Khronos group to understand the specification, and because it's very hard when you do not have any implementation, even some mock-up to design a good API. Okay, what is concretely a full SYCL program? So it's simple because it's based on modern C++. So the idea is that you have this abstract storage. That means that something which can be accessible from the host or any device. So here I'm defining some 1D buffer of n integers. You will have some queues to direct some work on some accelerators, and then you can submit some kernels on the device. That's the yellow part here. For example, here I just execute n instance in parallel of this lambda. So this is the code that will run on the accelerator. And what is very special to SYCL is that you have this concept of accessor to specify what you will do with the data. For example, my kernel here will access through these accessors the buffer, buff, in write-only mode. And okay, since I write all the elements, I do not want to spend time to waste time to initialize the element. So I say, oh, no init. And so A is now this accessor. Through this accessor, you can access your memory as usual. And on the host, you have some host accessor to access to the buffer. And then you have a range interface and you can work on it. But what is, besides expressing this intention, what is very important is that it implicitly defines the data flow graph according all your kernels. And that means that there is no need for dependency management from the end for the end user. Question. Okay, the question is either we have on our command group handler H something other algorithms because here I just have parallel for. We have some other ones. For example, you can copy, you can launch a single task. That means that if you, for example, on FPGA, I will use mostly that. So there are a few other member function to do some things, or yeah. But there are no. It's more low level, simple stuff. It's not super complex C++20 algorithm. From the STL, but you can build them on top of SYCL, and there is actually a parallel STL based on SYCL. But what is super interesting is that with only one queue, you can automatically transfer your data across devices just by creating accessors, and you can automatically, the runtime will automatically overlap computation and communication for you. So that's pretty cool. Because if you do not have that, like in OpenCL or in CUDA, you have to manage all that yourself. Besides this accessor model, there is something closer to CUDA, which is the unified shared memory. And here, instead of having buffers and accessors, you will have allocators. For example, here I will allocate an integer on shared memory that can be accessible from the host and the device. And then you can directly launch a parallel for the same way, but you do not need to define this command group with submit. But since you are losing the data dependency graph provided by the accessor, that means that now you have, for example, wait for the execution if you want to use the memory from A. So it's a trade-off, and of course you have to free, but that means on the right, if you are starting from an OpenCL or a CUDA model, it's perhaps easier to do a direct translation. And actually, Intel is providing a tool to do this automatic translation. Okay, FPGAs, because I'm here for that. So FPGAs, the idea is that, okay, instead of having processors or memory, things like that, okay, we'll provide you just an electronic device that you can do, and you can do whatever you want with it. So that's interesting. So the basic block is a configurable logic block, and you have an array of it, and that's why it's called a field programmable gate array, because you can reprogram actually each function of the CLB in the fields while your system is running or whatever. And you can also change the interconnection between all these CLB. So you have a lot of wires going all around the place. So the typical CLB is based on a lookup table. And lookup table, you can, it's based on the fact that you can represent any Boolean function by just an equivalent memory addressed by the entries. So, for example, if you have a lookup table, a Boolean function with two entries, x0 and x1, then you can just implement it by your memory or multiplexer, and then you will select the value A, B, C, D, which are 0 or 1. And if you can program A, B, C, D, then you can program the Boolean function implemented by this. And you have also registers that can store information in this system. And of course, now modern FPGAs have a lot of more stuff. So you can have block RAM, you can have specific blocks to accelerate computation. You can have high-speed I/O, external memory controllers. For example, a DSP block can look like that. You have optimized adders at the hardware level, and you can have optimized multipliers and other stuff. For example, on our latest chip, we have also ARM processors. You have, of course, the FPGA part. You have the VRAM. You can have also some other bigger. You have bigger blocks of RAM, the URAM, and so on. And I will not talk about this, but we have an array of 400 VLIW processors with 1024 bits. So you can do some crazy things on these chips. And everything is interconnected with a network on chip, and you have PCI interface, DDR or HBM, and a lot of stuff. And you have also direct radio frequency converters, because typically the use case of this chip will be to do a software-defined radio in a 5G system, for example. So how to program that? Well, there is this bit stream. It's, after all, programming is just about 0 and 1. But unfortunately, it's private information. You can do it. So usually people use HDL to describe the behavior and the structure of the program. So you have the choice between VHDL, which is kind of Ada, and Verilog, it's kind of C, but the semantics is completely different. So you have full control, but you have very low productivity. So that's why people develop this concept of high-level synthesis, where you can translate some existing language directly into HDL. The idea is to increase the productivity. There is also OpenCLC that can be used to program FPGAs, which is kind of a dialect on top of HLS. But at least it looks a little bit more like a GPU if you use OpenCLC. But the problem here is that none of these solutions is a single source. That means that you really have this Frankenstein model where you have the host program and you have a completely different program running on the device in another language, and there is no type safety and things like that. Anyway, so now I will just run through how to do HLS. So if you did, so for simple expression, so you for C, C++ expression, you can do a direct functional translation by interconnecting some functional operation. What is interesting is that on FPGA, you can also pipeline things because you have registers. So if you have this operation to be done inside a loop, then you could just add some registers at some place in your function evaluation to just have several execution at different state of the computation in flight, so that in that way you can increase the throughput. I will detail this a little bit more later. The problem is that in an FPGA, well, there is no program counter because there is no processor, so you cannot do directly for loops with jump and things like that. So you have to use some tricks. So the idea is to translate some normal C++ control flow into a finite state machine. So that means that, okay, when I am in state 0, I have not started my computation. When I am in state 1, I am in the loop. And in state 2, I am at the end of my computation. So in that way, you can simulate the C, C++ execution. And that means that you can synthesize a kind of equivalent circuit. For example, here, I have a loop, and my ACC, my accumulator variable, is used with inner loop dependencies across my loop iterations. That means that ACC here is looped again into my multiply accumulator. And so just to do some hand waving to explain you some ideas about HLS, how it can work. Okay. So now how we can use this to do SYCL on FPGA. So let's see, for example, I want to compute the universal answer on an FPGA. So I will create a buffer of 1 integer. So you have also in SYCL a lot of various functions to introspect your runtime. For example, I can get the name of the device behind my queue or the vendor and things like that. And I will just submit. So here it's a single task to answer to, so it's not a parallel for like we've seen before. And I will launch this super interesting computation. 42 into A of 0. Interestingly, I'm still waiting it's not only a Bjarne Stroustrup, to SmartRef, because if I had SmartRef, I could say directly A equal 42. So please vote for the SmartRef at the next ISO C++ committee. You can also name a kernel by adding a type name, and we'll see how it works. And then we can get the answer back from the answer buffer with the host accessors and display it. So actually, I can launch my, my program. So here I'm using Xilinx U200 device, which is a PCI card, kind of a GPU. And then I do not have it on my laptop, so I'm using an emulator. So now an RTL emulator has been launched on my laptop, so it simulates all the FPGAs, and then, haha, the answer is 42. Woohoo! Fantastic. Okay, but we can actually look at how it is done inside the FPGA. A question? Yes.
Is that emulator open source or
Good question. Is this emulator open source? No, it is XSIM. But now some customers have asked to be able to use other emulator or simulators. So now I'm not specialist of the area, but I think now you can use or you can plug in your own simulator in the system. But yeah, no, it's our own RTL simulator which is used here. Other question?
Yeah, maybe I missed that. Why is it called Q device? What is it? Q.
You mean in this program? Why? Oops, sorry. Oop. Okay. The question is why we are using get device on the queue. Is this a question?
Why it's called a Q? It's a Q.
Well, you queue because you are enqueuing some work. So you can think that like a task-oriented library, and it's named a queue because it comes from the graphics world, and Khronos, they like queues, that a queue of command. So here we enqueue a command group handler, so that's why it's CGH. And what is in this lambda is actually the command you send to your queue, which is associated to a device, and it has been associated to a device because we've used some special device selector. Yeah. Thank you for asking. Yeah, because well, I do not have time to dive in too much into some SYCL tutorial. But good news! Next week there are 3 days about SYCL. There is a SYCL tutorial at CPPCon. Okay. But what is interesting is that now we can look at what is inside the circuit. So, for example, you can look, oh, wow, there is this. Okay, let's start with this first. So you can look, oh, you have the schematics of your board, and then you can dive into it. You can see all the wires, and then you can, okay, perhaps dive into this, or well, it's very interesting. But okay, so the basic idea is that in the FPGA you have a static region, which is the pre-configured environment to run your kernels. For example, your PCI interface, the memory controllers, and things. But more interesting for us is the dynamic regions. And oh, here I have something named class 42. Ha ha ha. So then you can look at it. And okay, that's the interface of your kernel on chip. So that means, well, perhaps we can just zoom a little bit. But your kernel is connected to the global memory bus, and you have also some other bus to control the kernel, to say, okay, you will start now. That's the stream XC interface, or you can reset your kernel and things like that. So we can actually dive even more in it. And voila, that's our kernel. So I tried to look at it to understand what it does. And honestly, I was not able to understand why it answered 42. So I think I've understood that this stuff here, they are just the registers to capture the address where you have to write 42. But after that, there is this finite state machine I've been talked a little bit about. So that's basically a huge shift registers that will control the schedule of all the function inside your kernel. But honestly, that's not super clear how you will output 32, even if you start from this, which is a memory controller. So your kernel is connected to that. But what is even more interesting is that, for example, if I go back, is that you can really enter the matrix. I mean, for example, if you dive into your I can display, for example, I can highlight my cell, for example, I will pick blue, and then I can show the device. And now you can see the blue stuff here is actually, it's my kernel. And then, so all the other parts on my FPGA, the FPGA here, the model I have is actually made of 3 different chips. So it's a multi-chip FPGA, which is called SLR in our jargon. And here you will have the PCI and one of the memory controller. And we can actually, wrong button. I need to unselect. But you can really enter the matrix. So you can really dive into, okay. It's a little bit slow, but oops. I think it's written in Java, the API, but so you can really look at all the configuration, and it would be interesting to debug C++ program with this tool and try to understand with some. And then you can select whatever you want. You can zoom. Okay, well. So this is a part of. So here you can see it is. A lot, and you can jump to the schematics just to see where it is. Of course, it is in another window, so it was this one in your system. So it's actually used to throttle the kernel when you have memory back pressure, because the kernel is faster than the memory. But anyway, that gives you the idea of what is behind the scene. But what is interesting with SYCL is that you can really have some weird application for FPGA. So why not path tracing, for example? So we started this application where you can render some graphic stuff in a very, that's basically what is used in movie rendering nowadays. So you can simulate smoke, you can have, here I have a bouncing ball, so you can simulate the time effect, and you can simulate also the depth of field and things like that. And yeah, you can simulate a lot of optical effects, also super cool, like metallic effect. And the idea is, it's based on ray tracing, but, so basic ray tracing is just you launch a ray through your pixel, and it will bounce on some object, and at the end you will integrate the color along the ray. But path tracing is massive. It's Monte Carlo integration on top of ray tracing. That means that for each pixel of your image, you will launch thousands of rays at different places, and then you can use probability bouncing to simulate smoke effect and to simulate a lot of weird stuff and timing effects. So very, very, very interesting. So we've used that. Well, we started as a joke inside the Khronos committee because there are a lot of GPUs people there, and oh yeah, well, FPGA, we can do anything with FPGA, so why not path tracing? Okay, so we did a direct brute force implementation, and it was interesting to see, okay, what happens when you go outside of the typical FPGA application domain. So for us, it was also interesting to see the limitation of SYCL. For example, in SYCL kernel code, you cannot usually use function pointers or dynamic polymorphism. Question?
Yeah, I was wondering, you were talking about you were using the ray tracing. Have you ever also did photon mapping using the SYCL FPGAs?
So the question is, did we use SYCL to do photon mapping? Personally, no, but perhaps on Earth, some people, but just try yourself. But for us, it was also a good opportunity to improve our SYCL workflow, and it triggered a lot of bugs and some problems in the math libraries and and it triggered also a lot of bugs in Xilinx runtime. But what is good is that, for example, XRT is open source, so we were able to directly fix the problems there. And actually, currently, it uses only a small part of the FPGA, and there is no real optimization done at the application level. And what is interesting is that a side effect of the C++ zero-cost abstraction means that you can have almost direct translation of the C++ into the hardware implementation, which means that if you change the way, for example, you compute your ray tracing, for example, if you emulate GPUs in C++, then you will have synthesized a GPU. So that's completely mind-blowing. That means that you do hardware design by writing C++. So the question would be, right now it's super slow, but would it be possible to have a competitive path tracer? We don't know. So, for example, what are the change we had to do to the application to run with SYCL is that, okay, a lot of implementation, for example, a famous blog on ray tracing in a weekend, is using a lot of dynamic polymorphism, which is not allowed inside kernels. While Xilinx tools are able to devirtualize when you have only one class, which is kind of trivial devirtualization. Of course, it doesn't work when you have different. But the good news is that, okay, you can rewrite your code by using stud variants. And stud variants are usually less efficient than dynamic polymorphism on CPUs because you can use function pointers. But on FPGAs, well, everything is in hardware. That means that you can execute in O1 complexity stud visit. Because all the type comparisons in the stud visit are done in parallel. So, which is something that you cannot do directly on CPU. So, typically, you have a hittable interface in your ray tracer or path tracer, and you will have all your graphics objects implement the hittable interface, so by overriding hit, taking some ray and some other parameters, and the typical ray intersection function will create something to record the ray information, and you will apply the hit member function to each object, and it will use a dynamic polymorphism. So the translation in the stud variant world is now you have a hittable type, which is a variant of all your graphics object, and then you will have just duck typing with each graphics object implementing this hit function. So it could be a concept. And then at the end, instead of calling this the member function interface, you just call stud visit to just dispatch to the right type your operation. So pretty straightforward. And then that's the layout of the path tracer on the GPU I have on my desktop in my cubicle. So that's the yellow part. So you see there's still a lot of empty room. So there is probably a lot of possibility to improve this stuff. But anyway, to run efficiently on some FPGA, you need to precise some stuff. So you need to add some information to the compiler. But like I said at the beginning, it's a zero-cost abstraction, C++ programming model. So why not implementing some specific FPGA concept directly into C++? In the same way, for example, we have C++20, and you can have the parallel algorithm in the STL, and you can have the SYCL that will add some heterogeneity, and then you can precise the memories interconnect, or even the special operations such as machine learning stuff that you might have in your hardware. For example, very important on FPGAs are the concept of pipelining. So if you think about a loop, I don't know if it's quite readable. Typically you will read some operands, you will do some computation, and you will write some result at the end of the loops. But if you execute this like that on the processor, it's suboptimal on FPGA, because when you synthesize all your operation in hardware, that means that they coexist physically on your device. That means that you can execute all these operations at the same time. So the idea is to do pipelining. So you will start the read of the first execution, and then you will have the computation of the second iteration, but at the same time, for the first iteration, and at the same time you will start reading the operands for the second iteration, and so on. And at the end, that you will reduce the latency of your loop, and that means that you will be more efficient on the FPGA hardware. So how do we translate this in SYCL? So we have a pure C++ decorator, which is just a function to wrap your normal kernel lambda or function. And then, voila, you have a pipeline loop just by adding this. How it is done in other tools such as HLS? Well, you have pragmas, or you can have attributes. But if you are able to do this, that means that it's compatible with metaprogramming. That means that you can just use normal C++ tricks to do whatever you do. How it is implemented concretely? Well, we just pipeline. It just you execute your function, so providing functors, but you add some annotation, Xilinx pipeline with some parameters. I will not detail here. And this annotation is actually a Clang attribute, the Clang annotate, where we put all the arguments, and then in our middle end, in LLVM, we'll be able to gather this information to really translate this into a real pipeline. We have data flow, which is also super useful on FPGA, because when you have some functions which is made of other functions, they all coexist at the same time, which means that instead of executing each function sequentially, you might be able, if, for example, each function is using your argument, the argument in a special way, then you could start func A and then func B and func C at the same time, and find a schedule where you can really have a faster execution. And the same, we have a data flow decorator to just express that, and which is just re-implementing the same stuff. Even more interesting is that even the memory is configurable on FPGAs. And if you are old enough to remember the craze where you had to rewrite your loops to avoid memory bank conflicts and things like that, well, now you can just ask the compiler to the tools to reorganize the memory for you. For example, you could have 4 banks with a cyclic partitioning where all the array elements are organized in cyclic way, or you could have block partitioning, or like that. Or you could have even complete partitioning. That means that you will have 1 register per element of your array. That means that you will have huge bandwidths, no conflict, but at the price, of course, of a lot of hardware that you will have to throw in this, because you will have a lot of interconnects. Because all these small memories will have to be wired to your consumer. So, but yeah. So we've extended basically stud array. Now we have a partition array, so you have a new parameters to explain how you want to distribute your data and things like that. Compared to how it is done in HLS, C++, where you have Pragma HLS array partition to decorate some existing arrays, or in OpenCL you have other syntax, but you get the idea. And often on FPGA card, you have various external memories or banks. For example, on the U200, we have 4 DDR bank. And then we have an accessor property where you can declare where the memory will be allocated when you use buffer in this kernel. So AI will actually reside in the DDR bank 3. So the trick is that you can then organize all your data layout to avoid bank conflict. If you have different data accessed at the same time from the same memory, it will work, but it will be probably slower because you will have to share the bandwidth with some other consumer. So you can control this stuff. But I think the coolest stuff is that you can do really arbitrary precision arithmetics on FPGA. And what is strange is that I discovered that the C language is, it looks like they have rebooted, and I know they are making a lot of progress. For example, in C23, there will be this bit int keyword. So now you can declare 3-bit variable and do computation, 3-bit addition, and so on. That's amazing. And okay, on the CPU, well, it will probably be implemented as a car addition, an 8-bit operation, but on FPGA, it's good. And so you can wrap this in a arbitrary precision int, a templated type, for example, in C++, and then you will have all the type safety. You will be able to control all the various stuff. So, for example, you can also, from this integer, simple types, you can just, end user can just program, whatever they want. For example, I have right now, an intern, a PhD intern who is working on computer floating point arithmetic. So he was able to implement, for example, a 22-bit floating point types with 7-bit exponents and 14 bits, Mantissa, just by writing C++. And at the end, well, some implementation detail, but at the end, you just declare a buffer of this new IEEE data type, declare here, template stuff, and voila, it will just work as usual. You will just have accessors, and it's type safe. You do not have to precise the type. It will just be implemented in an efficient way on the system. And sometimes you want to pass some options to the HLS compiler, and how to do that in a single source world. The idea is to embed the compiler options directly into the code. And we did that by using user-defined literal. So here, my kernel frequency of 400 megahertz with an optimization level of 2 is a magical UDL named Vitis option that will generate actually a decorator, a functor, that will just add this information on around the kernel. So it's pretty terse and, well, as we have seen recently on the UDL talk from Pablo Halpern, we can do crazy stuff with UDL. But more interesting is that now, okay, since that's the first time I have a C++ audience to give my talks, so you can really write generic code. For example, imagine that you want to write a generic executor that will take some ranges and will return a new range and adding each and applying element-wise an operation. For example, simple case, I have 2 vectors and I want to just add the element bitwise and do my computation on my accelerators. Well, I call generic executor and it will return me a buffer, for example, and then I can just use this buffer later on the host and I can display the result and it will be 6, 8, 10 by adding this element together. But we would like to also pass, for example, a vector, a set, and a list of various data types and just call these folding operators element-wise and just display the result and you will have some other information. And you want that to generically be executed on the device. We can do that. So we have a C++20 function taking the operation and the input. We can wrap with a Booth-Anna tuple all my data into a tuple of buffers. We can express our compute operation by folding the operation on all the arguments. We need to compute the size. The size is just the size of my first buffer, for example, and we need to compute the type of the buffer we want to return. And for that, we need to do a fake computation, basically, and to use the type of the return computation on the first element of all my buffers, for example. And then you can declare an output buffer of the right type of size element. And we can then send on my FPGA the computation by creating a queue with this selector and submit my command group. And my command group will be, okay, first I need to have an accessor on all my buffers. Then I apply a Booth-Anna transform that will take all my buffers, my tuple of buffers, and will return a tuple of accessors. And I need also to create an output accessors on my output buffer, and then the computation will be here. It's pipeline computation inside the loop, and I need to compute the operands for my loops, which is also a Booth-Anna transformation that will take each accessors in my tuple and will return a tuple of the ith element of each accessor, and then I just do the computation and return the result. Voila. So it's completely generic. There is no type specific written in my kernel, just pure modern C++. And then you can see it will generate this yellow integer 16-bit function, and here they are double and float. It's a little bit bigger. Well, I will skip. I will not show you the stuff. But what is good is that you can really use modern metaprogramming as a hardware design tool. For example, imagine that if I replace my Booth-Anna fold left to my operator by, for example, by using Booth-Anna algorithm. So I could sort my functions by increasing data types. In that way, I will start with, for example, computing on 3 bits and ending by the heavy lifting computation such as double. And then by doing this, you can reduce the hardware usage. So you can do pretty cool stuff. Okay, how does it work? Behind the scene, well, what is interesting with the SYCL is that you can use it as a co-design and debug tools, because you can have different kind of SYCL implementation. For example, you can have a full SYCL compiler, and you can run on the real hardware, on a simulator. But since SYCL is pure C++, that means that it can run on your laptop, and it will be a CPU emulation mode. That means that you do not need a specific weird CUDA compiler or whatever to run SYCL, because it's just C++. And it will emulate your system at normal C++ speed. You can use your standard debugging, but what I found fantastic is that you can use the thread sanitizer on the full application. But if you think that each kernel run actually in the host, but with some hardware emulation, that means that you can debug some hardware features with your debugger and your thread sanitizer. I think that's the only environment I know where you can do that. For example, if you have DMA libraries in your system, since it is translated into C++, then the DMA doing the wrong race condition or whatever will be detected by your thread sanitizer. So that's amazing. And you can instrument your code to do the compute statistic on your system, and you can use whatever you want. Okay, on the implementation, so it's a mix and match of one API DPC++, where we reuse all the runtime. We use OpenCL host API to control the FPGA. The Clang frontend is used to split host and device code, and there are various LLVM passes to message the device code. And from Tricycle, we've used some specific runtime to handle the Xilinx FPGA decoration, and we have various passes to make the LLVM IR edible by our Xilinx tools, more or less. And we have a Python script to drive our VITES V++ from the Clang driver to do whatever is required. But to conclude, what I found very cool with SYCL, it's really about inclusion. So the idea is not to have any transistors left behind. For example, in my desktop, I have an Intel CPU, Xilinx FPGA, NVIDIA GPU, and then, well, I can write on a slide the full application where you will run some computation on the host, then on the FPGA, and then you will operate on the data on the GPUs and display the result. So it's just in one framework. And there is no template, no type name, no class keyword used here. It's completely generic, type safe. There is no specific types precise in the kernels. It's completely generic, and there is no communication handling. It just works automatically. Okay, I've put some resources. Why SYCL is pronounced SYCL? Because of this. Well, excuse my French, but I guess with another accent you can understand. So to conclude, well, unfortunately it's only a research project at Xilinx. So if you want to do real stuff, just use the real tools from Xilinx. If you are not interested in C++20, well, you need to understand that heterogeneous computing is here to stay, and so we need some standard and programming model to handle all this complexity. And good news, we have SYCL from Kronos Group, and it's a pure modern C++ domain-specific embedded language for heterogeneous computing, and it is single source, and that means that in a single language you can meta-program the full architecture. That means that at compile time you can decide, this computation is a little bit heavy. Oh, yeah, I will send it on these GPUs or FPGA or whatever. And it's not magic. It's just modern C++, which means that you can use your normal laptop or whatever to do target emulation, debug, co-design for free. And it's open source and based on open standards. So you are not locked in. And good news, there are a lot of support for most of the well-known backend, either standard like Vulkan, OpenCL, or proprietary such as CUDA. And if you're not happy, well, it's a standard committee, so join us to improve all these standards. Thank you. Don't know if we have time for questions. Okay.
Okay, yeah. So I wanted to ask quickly about when the actual compilation to the FPGA happens. Like, does it happen when you run the program, or can some of it happen before?
Okay, the question is when the compilation for FPGA happen. So basically, you compile, you launch Clang that will run a lot of backend compilers behind the hood, such as PTX or whatever, OpenCL. Or so it will run rather late in this pipeline. So instead of lowering typically to use the CPU, you will launch the FPGA compiler. And actually, often on FPGA, the real work happens in the link time. So the compile time for each kernel is almost nothing, because to have LTO equivalent on the FPGA, you will have all the work done at link time.
Okay.
Other question?
Yes, just wanted to ask you, can you actually have, you were talking about you can write generic executors, but can you actually use those to write generic or create execution policies to put into the kernel algorithm library, or actually specifically the numeric library, where you want to do huge calculations of numeric data across multiple targets?
Okay, so the question is whether I present a generic executor, whether it can be used to run actually or to implement the generic STL executors and API and things like that. No, but it can be. Well, SYCL it's high level in some sense compared to CUDA or to OpenCL, but it's at the same level. It just looks more modern because it's C++, but there are not so many more features, but it can be used as a basic block to implement some real executors, to do some data distribution or things like that. But you have to rely to either on you or on some other people to implement this for you. Other question?
So when we have the C code to build with these tools altogether,
Yes.
How do we download the software to FPGA?
Okay. When we have compiled our code, we download it to the FPGA. Well, for that, for example, Xilinx provides you an OpenCL host interface. That means that even if you do not program in OpenCL C your kernel, you can use some other interface. It could be Vulkan or it could be whatever. Here it is OpenCL. And then in OpenCL, there are some APIs such as CL load program. And then it will take the FPGA binary, which is huge because you have a lot of configuration in it. And once you have loaded the FPGA, then you can run some kernels. So all the FPGA kernels will be seen as built-in kernels from the OpenCL API point of view. Otherwise, other vendors such as you will use on CUDA, you will use well, but your question was about FPGA, so.
Do a demo, this type of project.
Well, maybe not now, but yeah. So I think it's out of time, but you can ask me questions after, since I'm still here for 2 days. And remember, next week, 3 days on SYCL, if you want.
Workshops after that?
Yeah, I think Michael Wong knows more about it, but
Okay, so we think.
It's a tutorial, it's not a workshop.
Workshop at supercomputing.
Oh, yeah.
We always have one at ISC as well. And the SYCLCon.
Mm.
You have to repeat.
No. Okay, so I thought it was over, but yeah, so we have so this tutorial next week, and then there will be something at supercomputing conference next month, and other vendors are organizing on a regular basis some training on their own implementation. I know that when APIs, they have one right now, I think, and they will do another one during supercomputing, and CodePlay is also doing some training on a regular basis. Well, SYCLCon, but it's next year, so you will have to wait for 6 months for SYCLCon, but if you are really in a hurry, well, okay. There is some information online, and
so there's always the training on SYCL.tech. There's a dedicated website called SYCL.tech.
Actually, I'll probably ask Michael, in the class next Monday, will that also cover like Vulkan Compute or?
the question is whether the next week the class will cover Vulkan Compute. I don't know. And actually, Vulkan Compute, maybe there are some people more knowledgeable about it. But I think that most of the implementation I am aware of are based on Vulkan graphics. We change a little bit things. It makes your code a little bit restrictive, even at the C++20 level, SYCL. But you can do the same tricks, use a stud variant and things like that to avoid using function pointers or pointers or whatever.
Yeah, so we won't cover Vulkan Compute.
Okay.
But the same thing can pretty much be done. There isn't a lot. Vulkan Compute is not as strong in terms of what they can do. I think SYCL can do more in that compute side.
Okay.
Well,
It's strong in graphics on the graphics side.
Okay. I think we need to stop and go on we have a party. It's party time, no? Okay, thank you.